So we'll now start with a panel discussion, and I'll request Sarah and the other two panelists, Swapnil and Shaligram, to join us here, and I'll introduce them. So just to follow up on that answer to your question, I think the key point is determining what's your original source of data. Is it the electronic record that's the original, or is it the manual entry that's a paper record that's original? And the original must always be maintained, right? So it's really important to make that distinction. All right, so let me introduce our two additional panelists. We have Swapnil Ballal, who has over 25 years of experience. Initially started out in R&D, moved into manufacturing, and then moved into quality assurance. I think that's a good transition because QA then knows what happens on the shop floor, so they're not operating from some sort of a blind vision. So he worked at several companies, starting with Wokhard, Entos, Biocon, and then Dr. Reddy's, with increasing responsibilities and moving that transition into quality, and is currently an independent professional. He does quality-related consulting, and also is a partner in a small startup called Cambridge, which is a e-learning content provider for mainly quality-related trainings, which is, and as all of us know, training is really an important part of what we have to do in order to maintain that compliance. And our second panelist is Shaligram Rane, and he's currently VP and heading quality at the biotech facility of, or the biotech division of Lupin. Also, very long experience of close to 30 years in the pharma industry, in the quality function with Glenmark, Cadila, Dishman, Entos, and then Lupin. He's handled obviously many different, literally hundreds of different inspections from different companies, different regulatory agencies for different products, including European, EMA and FDA inspections for biologics. So we have, plus the two speakers who have already spoken. So we'll have some panel, discussion. What I thought was, I have some questions prepared, although some of them have already been answered. Nevertheless, we'll have some questions from me just to get the discussion going, and then of course we'll open it to further questions from the audience. So we have good amount of time. We have about an hour for this discussion, and I hope it will be a very nice learning sort of exchange. So let me start with my first question. Now, especially some of you people, particularly Sriram and Shaligram, you have had experience dealing with regulatory agencies, including FDA and EMA, for 10 or more years. And just wanted to get your thoughts, starting with Shaligram maybe, on what have you seen changing over these years in terms of the focus of the regulatory agencies, as well as, what is your internal state of where you find the issues to be sort of more prevalent, etc. So just how have things changed over the years?
Yeah. So thank you. Am I audible?
Maybe you need to.
So the question is basically going forward, how we change. And just I will start with some of the other activity, like there was a cell phone which was launched in India in July 1995, and that time one call was held between the Jyoti Basu, who was the Chief Minister of West Bengal, and Indian Telecom Minister, and that time they started the discussion on the Nokia phone, which probably we never actually forget, because that was the starting point. Now, I'm just correlating that relation when we say the GMP and CGMP. So that time we had this cell phone with the button, and then you have to only call. But now everyone has a smartphone. So you can just see how we evolve this technology. And the similar type, like when we say the GMP, so in the GMP, so the expectation is the patient should be safe and the product should be quality as expected and the efficacy. Whereas the C stands for the always in continuous mode, and the technology and system should be upgraded on the routine basis. So if you go back and check our technology about 20, 25 years back for the telephone industry and the current industry, so we are still not up to that level. And I would like recommend to have the more and more digitalization in the industry, because now Dr. Sarah and Sriram have already explained a lot of things on the issues and the case studies, and I think that is one of the way how we can take it.
Thank you. Sriram, you've had similarly long experience. Any thoughts from your side on how the perspective of the agencies has changed over the years? How has industry's approach to compliance and quality changed over the years?
So my experience based on the last 12 plus years of leading the organization in regulatory inspections, frankly, I don't think the regulatory expectations have changed significantly unless they were mandated by guidelines or guidance documents from the agencies. However, the perception of the regulators has become more focused on the third major component which I mentioned, which is the data integrity. Probably it was there even earlier, but the tools to identify the data integrity breaches were less. As technology has evolved more, for example, the attendance check. Today, it's very easy for anyone to find out if a person has done the work and signed contemporaneously. You can go to the access levels even to that area, also with the individual login passwords when he operated the equipment, to find out is he doing a contemporaneous entry, was he actually present or somebody else was doing it. So the tools available now for identifying the data integrity breaches have been more, and that's what inspectors are able to use it to identify them. But in terms of the concept of conformance to the applications or compliance to the requirements, 6 systems of quality, these were there even from the 2004 guidance documents. There will be a little bit of subjectivity from inspector to inspector that we cannot eliminate it. But overall, I think the emphasis on data integrity, trust, which inspectors were able to identify now with the better electronic solutions available, that has made the difference. And that's what we have to be cognizant of.
Thank you. Let's take up another topic in terms of, I think Rane had asked about, culturally what do you see within India. Just to sort of broaden that question a little bit, Swapnil, you've worked with a number of different companies, and as a consultant, you probably are now interacting with several more. So what's your observation on what you see as common themes across the industry, where you feel that certain things are well in control, certain things are not so much well in control, maybe certain things there's less understanding among the companies. So can you just comment on your observations on such themes that go across companies within the country?
Yeah, I think one basic observation is that, which also includes your previous question about what has changed in the last 10 years, is that the management has become more, let's say, understanding about the quality assurance concepts. And earlier, if there was a quality concept with the management, it wasn't really coming out. But now most of the companies which I interact with, whether they are mid-size or large ones, there is a clear mandate from the management that we would absolutely kind of follow the rules and create a system which will create a quality culture. So that's one thing which have surely changed, and everybody knows that there is no value in saving 1 or 2 batches by doing something hanky-panky and affecting your overall compliance situation. That's one. in general, the quality understanding and QA concept have actually improved in people. QA has a fair understanding. A lot of time, I think the gap is between the production managers' understanding of what should happen versus what's happening on the floor itself. So that is, I think, still a gap.
So are you saying a gap between the production manager and the production staff?
Yes. So a manager would feel, yeah, this is what they should be doing and this is what should be happening. But for example, I don't know whether all companies have a requirement that the manager should actually go and stand in front of the operation room or inside the room maybe once in a day. How many vice presidents actually go and see the facility on a routine basis? Or they are pretty happy with looking at the bar charts which you present on a monthly basis. So that's something where there's a gap. You may feel that yes, I'm having a system which is working pretty well, but at the ground level there may be some differences between what's happening, and that's just because of the disconnect. Not that anybody wants to do that way.
Certainly. So I think that's a very good point. Swapnil has brought up about managers, shouldn't be disconnected with the operations, and they should be more hands-on in seeing what's really happening on the shop floor. Because even as Sarah mentioned earlier, that could be the difference in terms of compliance, where they have a very well-written SOP, but really not the right kind of practice. Sarah, would you like to add? I mean, you have so much experience going to so many different companies within India. What's your observation on what are some of the common themes that you see across Indian companies?
Yeah, no, and I think,
both pluses and, where do you think things are okay and where do you think things are need improvement? Yeah.
no, I think to your point as well, I think management is becoming more aware of what the expectations are and wanting to put systems in place. I think the disconnect is also in what is actually practical and actually accomplishable.
Mm-hmm.
So creating something that's impossible to maintain or impossible for an operator to be able to do this and actually the work that they're needing to do or do the documentation. I think those are the things that having that eyes on what's going on and having the people doing the work actually contribute to writing the procedures covering the work. I would also say too, in terms of the application of scientifically sound principles in terms of even establishing certain procedures and also in investigations. These are things that when investigations are done, it should be done in a scientific way, and whatever the conclusion is, it should have science behind it in reaching that conclusion. So I think these are things that are important, things that could be improved, and I think in terms of the management culture, I think the expectations are clear, and I think FDA and other regulators have done a really good job of being transparent about what the expectations are, and I think companies are trying to make sure that they're meeting those expectations.
And do you see, just to sort of continue on that theme a little bit, do you see any, let's say, when you look at 483's observations that come with Indian companies, do you see a pattern that's maybe different from what you see in, let's say, in US or Europe or elsewhere? Is there some particular area where you find more 483s in India are given out in that particular area compared to how that happens in the US or Europe?
Yeah, I think, I think the trends globally are the same, and a lot of the most frequent observations are related to the quality unit. And so for us, an observation that's related to the quality unit is always going to carry more weight, because if there's problems within the quality unit, that it impacts all the systems, right? So I think for us, those are the ones that we would put the most, emphasis on when we determine the severity of what those observations are. But I think there's a lot of things within the quality system, adherence to procedures, procedures well written, investigations conducted completely. All of those things tie back to the quality unit. So I think in general, those global trends are the same, and that's where the agency really would prioritize any types of follow-up compliance actions would be based off of the severity of how we evaluate those observations.
Yeah, I hope some of you are taking notes, because these are really, really valuable insights that you should take back to your organizations as to what to do and what not to do, and where the emphasis is and what the expectations are. Right now it may seem obvious to you, what you're hearing, and then you'll forget it 3 days later once you're back home. So, please really, as I said, take notes. This is, no less than a university class. Swapnil, I don't know if you have done any analysis of, because I know so many people do, analysis of 483 trends. Have you done any such analysis that gives you any insight into something that's maybe more prevalent in India compared to elsewhere, or anything like that?
Well, actually, if you look at the top 5 observation globally, what US FDA does, they are in general pretty wide. So a lot of things get captured into it. For example, SOP not following. So it could be basically, people not following the SOP versus, SOP not matching what is the actual procedure. So it's a bigger basket in itself. So it's, in that way, it's pretty difficult to look at it and say whether there is a difference or not. But in general, whatever we see, apart from the DI issues, most of the issues are common. Again, the responsibilities of quality unit and how they execute it, how much control they have, or at least authority they have in operations on a day-to-day basis. Investigations, of course, is one big issue. And in fact, I still had one question on that.
It's a panel discussion. You can ask each other questions as well.
So if you look at the top 5 observations in last 5 years, investigation and discrepancies has always been on top 5. Now,
I think we can. Yeah.
So is there a difference between the quality of investigation, what you see in India, versus, let's say, the rest of the world, or let's say US, Europe, in terms of how far we are within those, in terms of where, how good is our investigation or how not so good we are? I mean, do you see a pattern between what you see in India? This kind of gaps we always see when we look at investigations. In my opinion, we are really not very experienced or expert in root cause analysis. But do you see a similar pattern elsewhere in the world also?
No, thank you. And that's a great question. So I'll speak to my India experience because I have more of that than I do even in other parts of the world now. So I think in terms of the investigations, what we see are failure to expand the scope of the investigation itself. So a lot of times you see an investigation and it's one problem, they look at it for that one lot or even maybe that one time period within that lot, and they don't extend that in a scientific fashion to what else could be impacted. We also see times where there's root cause identified or not identified, or the same, like a big no-no for us is the same root cause in multiple investigations and the same kappa each time. So it can't be the same root cause and the same kappa because clearly your kappa from before wasn't effective if you're still getting that same root cause. So those would be some of the things that we've seen. Absolutely.
And just to add one more point, if you look at the guidances on deviation investigations, it has been there forever that this is what US FDA would look for. I mean, there are clearly lines which says impact on other batches are to be investigated. So if even today we are missing it, then we are doing something wrong. One thing what you can simply do is that create a template in your QA system which says this is what is minimum required in investigation, and have one line says impact on other batches. Write not applicable and give a justification. But in that case, you can't miss it. And this is something which we shouldn't be missing because it's clearly expected that impact on other batches, impact on the release of this, why are you releasing a batch, all need to be clearly justified.
Thanks.
Yes. Just to add in the investigation part, because many times the investigation done by the managers and they never involve the shop floor guys. And because of that reason, probably we could not able to find out the actual root cause, and just we are preparing some story and then we take the appropriate action on that. And the other part is the impact assessment, which is quite important, which is already mentioned by Sarah and Swapnil. So basically, if there is even contamination issues, like in one of the case study, Sarah mentioned about that, so that if there is a contamination in the aseptic operation, so up to what level we have to investigate. So, and of course, there is some batch release pressure as well from the management perspective. And because of that reason, many times we are failed to investigate up to that root cause, and then we start the another batch. So I think if we go back and check our own system, probably we'll get definitely some solution on that.
And I would just say that I would encourage management to talk to the operators, the engineers, because that's who FDA is going to talk to. So in our inspections, that's who we want to talk to, is the people that actually do the operations, that are involved with knowing the equipment. So their critical involvement is needed in investigation.
Sriram, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think purely from an investigations, my colleagues have told that it's done by managers. Across the industry, when I look at the Radica systems, this is the top concern from the observations. The technical and scientific expertise required to do investigations is probably lacking, primarily either from the manufacturing operations or from the quality assurance. Investigations, according to me, should be backed up by science, not by procedures. Procedures should guide you, but the depth of the investigation should be guided or should be front-ended by the availability of scientific evidences or logical reasoning. To me, I think that is one aspect where probably in India, the logical, technical expertise required to do the investigations is probably less as compared to what we see from the US. And that's...
And one last contribution on this investigation part of it. Another place where we always, or when I see a pattern we miss, is people don't visit the location where the deviation happens. So you can't do an investigation sitting in your boardroom or a meeting room. That's one. And number two is not interviewing the people who are actually operating the stuff. So if these two things are missing, you would really never hit the root cause, in my experience at least.
So, I mean, through all of their, comments, a couple of themes are clearly coming out, which is science and expertise in your process, and the understanding of what is actually happening in your process is one important thing that you should not, neglect. And that's probably number two. And the number one thing that's coming out, at least to me, is talk to the operators. Managers shouldn't just manage sitting in their offices. They should go to the shop floor. They should be aware of what's happening, talk to the operators, involve the operators in writing the SOPs, involve the operators in investigating failures, involve the operators in improving processes. Sarah also mentioned the FDA is going to speak to the operators. They're not going to speak to your managers. So, the heart of your operation are the operators, and they're not the managers. Managers are dispensable anyway. It's the people who do the real work. They are the key to your quality. They are the key to your quality systems. They are the key to your quality of your product. They need to understand what they're doing. They need to follow procedures. They need to be able to really understand and explain and so on. So I think that's really the common theme that I see coming out from this entire thing. Make the operators the heart of your quality system, not the QA managers, or for that matter, production managers either. We'll open to audience questions. We'll start with, since Naren, you already had one chance, I'll start with somebody else, sorry. And then we have Mayank, and then we'll have somebody in the back.
Yeah. My name is Karthik. I'm from Biocon Biologics. I worked very closely with Sriram over the years. I think it's more a remark, not a question per se. I think in some of the recent audits, I think the expectations, especially from FDA, has been to go beyond what is happening in your facility. Meaning, if you're going to be getting a lot of critical raw materials from the vendors, I think you need to have a better control on the vendor. And I don't know whether we have that yet compared to some of the established players. So just a warning to all the vendors sitting here that we will be coming after you, because we are expected to do so in terms of controlling the raw materials, controlling the quality of input material that you provide us. And I think that essentially boils down to some of the expertise that they talked about in controlling the investigations and giving a logical end. Many times it might not necessarily be because of what happened in the core facility where the product is manufactured, but elsewhere, which you don't know about. And having established quality agreements, to keep track of what is happening at the vendor side is also equally important.
So, Sarah, did you have any comment on what's the FDA's expectation on how much you should do to control the quality at the vendor side, apart from the regular qualification and testing that you do in incoming materials?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think even more recent news stories really underscores the importance of controlling of your raw materials, right? So I think conducting risk assessments of the raw materials is really important. So maybe a raw material like glycerin would have more risk associated with it than maybe something like methyl cellulose, right? So just even understanding the risk of your raw materials and the risk to the end product. I would also say, you in your vendor audits, and sometimes it's not possible for you to always do your own testing, but when you can, to do your own vendor testing and evaluation of your vendors, or have a really close understanding if you're contracting that out about what's actually being tested. Sometimes we've seen where the provider of the raw material will say, here's the composite sample for you to test, so you don't have to sample yourself, right? Well, that's not acceptable, right? You should be doing your own sampling. You should have a good understanding of what's actually happening with the raw materials, because at the end of the day, you're the one most at risk from raw materials being substandard or contaminated. So I would say to that extent, understanding the risk and controlling that risk is really important, and that's something that should be considered in your overall material management program.
So you mentioned about this separate sample. I think most of the times people do that when they are using maybe a sterile raw material that comes in a sterile packing, and that's when they have the vendor supply a separate sort of sample for testing. Is that a practice that you don't you frown upon, or?
So I'd say whatever you do, you need to make sure you have oversight of whatever practice is in place, right? So if this is something that they're asserting to you that represents a certain thing, you need to make sure that it fully represents that. So what we've seen before is where companies don't want to do their own sampling, either it's inconvenient or, as you say, there's some sort of other aspect to it that makes it impractical, but you need to have oversight of whatever they're testing to you that represents.
Right. Any of you want to add to this raw material topic? Okay, all of you.
Yeah.
Good. Start with Shaligram and then, yeah.
Okay. So, as you know, the vendor qualification is quite important, and many times we forgot to even focus on the site, because we do the audit of the one site. Let's suppose Merck is a supplier, and he has the manufacturing plant maybe in US and Europe also. And when we qualify that particular material from that particular site, and sometime it comes from the Europe, and that time we may have some problems specifically in the like a BSA. If you are using the albumin, then you have definitely some issues into that particular material. So we should have the appropriate control on the raw material, incoming raw material, as well as on the sterile front, like even pre-filled syringes. Mostly the BD is the one of the supplier from the US, and they have the different plants, and we never actually go into details, and just we are receiving the material. So we should have the system in place in SAP itself, so that whenever you receive the material, whether it is tracked with the catalog number or your own material or like that. But unless and until you have the control, it is really impossible. And then it comes when we investigate, that time we identify, that material came from the other different site.
Sriram, you had to something?
Yeah. See, the quality of the raw materials, particularly from the vendors, depends on to ensure that it's not the contributory factor in your investigations, relies on two things. The first is the effective vendor qualification process. It's not practically possible to go and sample at the vendor every batch. What you do in a vendor evaluation process is, does the company have effective procedures in place to manufacture that particular raw material, and which is a representative, it is stored in multiple containers. When they sample it for testing, is it a representative sample? How uniform is that? And one is the procedures and how they practice it. If you go and audit them and get the confidence that a company has the procedures, effective procedures, which are actually followed in letter and spirit, you get the confidence. The second part of it is coming from the process development. During the process development at our side, as a company which manufactures biosimilars, the criticality of the material needs to be assessed based on the impact during early stage development. Even a material we have seen sometimes a very trace metal can impact the fermentation process. So that comes again from an extensive understanding of early stage process development, where you can do a lot of screening of these particular materials and impact, thereby determine the criticality. And wherever there is a critical material, a risk-based vendor assessment, not from the company, but from the systems and practices followed that particular product. That helps in ensuring a consistent quality of raw materials from the vendor, which in turn minimizes investigations or deviations happening at your site.
Thanks. Can we just try shutting off those lights and see if the light is adequate in the room? And if this is okay, we'll just stay with this. Are you, actually these guys now are in the dark. So, all right, well.
At least we can switch off the disco mode.
Yeah, I don't think that's in their control. Maybe you need to switch on those lights and have the disco mode. So, I mean, is there a way to get them in the spotlight, so to speak, and yet not have it continuously flickering? No. So then maybe switch it on, because I think them being in the dark is probably the worst of the two. I think, right? Yeah. Okay. Just we'll see. All right. Other questions? Yeah, there was a question over there. Yeah, at the end. At the end. Sorry. Next, I'll come to you. Okay. Yeah. Actually, those lights are so bright, I'm unable to see people raising hands on that side of but I could see one. All right.
Hi, I'm Pradeep. I'm representing Hetero Biopharma here. So I want to shift the focus slightly again towards the data integrity that was discussed briefly. Thank you very much, Dr. Sara and Dr. Sriram, for an insightful presentation. So my question is, what is the expectation of the regulatory agencies, including the FDA, on the number of years that we should store the manual data? And I ask this question in context of, suppose as an organization, if we choose to file in the FDA after 15 years of developing a product, a legacy product, so which were manual records, and the procedures would have changed by now, but the development record would still be in manual modes developed 15 years before. So what is the expectations of FDA and regulators on this? Yeah,
and then maybe I'll just extend that by asking you to also take into account, or rather comment on how the FDA would, let's say, account for differences in technologies available, differences in just, people's diligence in recording certain things. 15 years ago, we talk about cGMP as being, you need to stay current with the times, but then if you're going back, what was the C at that time? So, how do you account for really old records, and what's the expectation?
So I think, in terms of the records, it's probably going to maybe be product specific. So maybe that's something that you can email to our inbox, and we can, if you have a specific example that you would like some information or guidance on, that would be my best answer to that, because again, you face so many different combinations of manual, electronic data. Is the product an innovator product, a generic? Some of those things would vary based off of exactly what the expectations of the agency would be.
But is there a sort of a common guidance on, as he asked, how many years of records do you need to maintain, or I suppose whatever went into the development you need to maintain, right?
So I think we probably have the guidance on our website with regards to that. I'm looking at my table of experts here, and I think this one is one that we'll take through the inbox and get back to you on. So.
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
Just to add, into.
Yeah, so Mayank over here.
He was going to add something here real
and
quick.
And then we're going to go to a woman over there that raised her. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, before going to the next question, just to add your question. So basically, of course, there is a guidance available, but when you file the BLA in the US, So specifically, after the filing, they are issuing the one letter to the company, and they clearly mention you have to preserve all the required data till at least the inspection. And after that, probably you can again take the permission from them. These are the data. And the other thing, because developmental and the validation and the clinical data should be perpetual as per my knowledge. Thank you.
I guess whatever goes into the application, you pretty much have to